working against our interest grips our attention and can seem very compelling. This is, in fact, an adaptive trait, like anxiety, for example. It is useful in moderate amounts, but counterproductive and even debilitating when extreme. While there are certainly conspiracies in the world, conspiracy thinking can be a cognitive trap that is easy to fall into, but very difficult to get out of. So-called grand conspiracies are not just an ordinary conspiracy where two or more people conspire together to engage in some secret or nefarious purpose. Grand conspiracies are very large. They involve many people across multiple organizations acting for long periods of time. Grand conspiracy theories tend to divide the world into three groups. The conspirators are a vastly powerful organization with incredible resources, evil intentions, up to and including taking over the world. They also, however, at the same time, make silly or simple mistakes or are incredibly careless. Otherwise, how would anybody know that they exist? The second group are the conspiracy theorists themselves. They have the ability, in their own view, to see the conspiracy for what it is. They can read between the lines and recognize the hand of the conspirators at work. They often envision themselves as being part of an army of light whose goal it is to save the world from the dark conspiracy. Everyone else in the world, 98, 99% of everyone, falls into the third group, which are the naive dupes, the people who are not engaged in the conspiracy and don't see that it exists either. A classic example of a grand conspiracy theory is the belief in the Illuminati. The Illuminati are alleged to be a shadow world government. Their goal is to bring about a new world order in which they rule and control the entire world. Conspiracy theorists see them behind everything that happens in the world. The Illuminati apparently, according to conspiracy theorists, reveal themselves through symbolism. For example, the seal on the US dollar. The all-seeing eye, they claim, is a symbol of the Freemasons, who, according to conspiracy theorists, are connected to the Illuminati. So innocent symbolism, such as the eye on the back of the dollar, becomes evidence that the Illuminati are behind much of what happens in the world. The Paranoid Style in American Politics by Richard Hofstadter in 1966 is considered to be the first scholarly essay on conspiracy thinking. Hofstadter looked at conspiracy thinking as a psychopathology, a paranoid delusional disorder. But the popularity of conspiracy theories is not fully explained by this. There must be more going on than a psychopathology if it's so common. Conspiracy thinking is a way to make sense of a complex or mysterious world. More likely when people feel that they lack control or are powerless or being victimized. Studies show that people who generally have a sense that they lack control over their lives or over their world are much more likely to engage in conspiracy thinking. In fact, we often lack detailed information about important political events or other events that occur throughout the world. This opens the door even further to conspiracy thinking because we can fill the gaps in our knowledge with ideas or notions that are comforting or useful in some way. Conspiracy thinking offers the illusion of certainty. In this way, it's very much like superstitious thinking, which provides the illusion of control. Therefore, these two types of thinking meet a basic psychological need. One of the forms of thinking that is inherent to conspiracy thinking is pattern recognition. A conspiracy theory is often just that. It is a pattern. In this case, it's a pattern imposed upon disconnected events. You may recall that we discussed pareidolia, the tendency of our brain to impose patterns on random data, such as seeing an image or a face in an oil stain or the bark of a tree or a cloud. Well, conspiracy thinking is like pareidolia, but cognitively. It is seeing a pattern or hyperactive pattern detection in events that are occurring. Essentially, conspiracy theorists will connect the dots and see an invisible hand operating behind the scenes. Pattern recognition is also more common in response to feelings of powerlessness, supporting the notion that conspiracy thinking in part serves this emotional need. Even visual pareidolia becomes more likely in research scenarios where subjects are made to feel more powerless. Conspiracy thinking potentially meets other psychological needs as well, such as self-esteem. It may be a reaction to an inability to attain one's goals. It may, being part of an army of light, for example, offers not only self-esteem, but a way to channel feelings of anger. It makes one feel as if they are part of a privileged, enlightened few. And this can have a powerful effect on self-esteem. So if you remember back to the lecture on the psychology of belief, conspiracy theories fit well into that notion. There is a struggle happening, in fact, inside of our brains between two inherent tendencies, reality testing and pattern recognition. Conspiracy thinking, which is a form of pattern recognition, is filtered through the reality testing module, if you will, or part of our brains. We see an apparent pattern, and then we ask ourselves, well, does this pattern make sense? Is it plausible? Does it conform to my internal model of reality? That's reality testing. Many apparent conspiracies are rejected by our brains, sometimes even subconsciously, because they just don't feel right. They fail our internal reality testing. People vary, however, in terms of the strength of their tendency to see patterns, their pattern recognition, and the strength of their reality testing. For example, the psychiatric disease known as schizophrenia is understood largely as a condition marked by diminished reality testing. Therefore, any conspiracy or paranoid notion that occurs to a severe schizophrenic, for example, bypasses the reality testing module and is accepted, is very compelling, seems to be real to that person. There are various cognitive traps that conspiracy thinking falls into. One is confirmation bias, which we also discussed already, a tendency to see evidence which confirms what we believe and to ignore or, more likely, explain away evidence which disconfirms the illusion. Any bit of evidence can be cast in a sinister light. And therefore, conspiracy theorists can, rather than having a reality testing filter, they can apply a sinister filter to reality, making everything seem as if it's part of a conspiracy. Therefore, ambiguous and even negative evidence can tend to reinforce the conspiracy and the conspiracy theorists' certainty and confidence in their conspiracy. After a while, this self-reinforcing effect convinces the conspiracy theorists that they must be correct, and it makes them incredibly resistant to change. Conspiracy theorists often commit what is called the fundamental attribution error, the tendency to blame other people's behavior on internal rather than situational factors. The conspiracy theorist tends to think that all actions and outcomes are deliberate and intended. Nothing is a coincidence. Nothing happens by chance. They ignore or downplay the quirky nature of history or of individual action. People may be innocently responding to the situation rather than deliberately orchestrating events in every detail. For these reasons and others, the conspiracy theory tends to become immune to refutation. This is its biggest cognitive problem or flaw. It quickly becomes what we call a closed belief system, a belief system that contains the mechanisms of its own insulation from external refutation, from facts and evidence. All evidence against the conspiracy, all evidence that could prove the conspiracy is not true, can be explained away as being part of the conspiracy itself. For example, any evidence that links Oswald to the JFK assassination could be seen to have been planted in order to frame Oswald, including the gun that he used, the bullet recovered from Connolly's stretcher, and the picture of Oswald training with the gun before the assassination. Further, any evidence that is lacking for the conspiracy can be claimed to have been removed or covered up by the conspirators. So, to give a separate example, the Men in Black, the shadow organization that is alleged to be in contact with aliens and engaged in a very powerful and detailed cover-up of the existence of aliens and the government's knowledge of them, can be said to swoop in and eliminate any evidence that would prove the presence of aliens on Earth. Therefore, conspiracy theorists can explain away the existence of any disconfirming evidence or the lack of any evidence that we think should be present for their preferred conspiracy theory. They render themselves immune to any possibility of refutation. Hence, it's a closed belief system. They also render themselves immune to any burden of proof. The burden of proof, of course, should fall upon anyone who is making a specific claim. Trying to shift the burden of proof off of oneself onto others, you have to believe what I claim unless you can prove my claim false, is a common logical fallacy employed to maintain a belief that lacks evidence. They frequently attempt to shift this burden of proof onto anyone who does not accept their theory. They challenge others to prove them wrong when they have the burden of proof. They combine this shifting of the burden of proof with the moving the goalpost logical fallacy. So they say it's your job, someone else's job, to prove that their conspiracy is false or that the standard interpretation of events is correct. However, they can always simply move the goalpost out of range of any evidence that is provided. No matter how much evidence is provided to support a non-conspiracy interpretation of events, it is never enough. For example, unless every quirky little detail of the events of 9/11 can be explained to an arbitrary level of detail, conspiracy theorists can claim that there are still holes in the standard explanation, and those holes equal their conspiracy. What conspiracy theorists then do is anomaly hunting. Remember, we discussed this on the previous lecture on pseudosciences. Anomaly hunting is just looking for anything that seems out of the ordinary or quirky, or that defies an immediate or obvious explanation. Anomaly hunting can therefore be used to say, see, there are problems or there are holes in the standard explanation, without having to provide any specific evidence of a specific conspiracy. If you take any complex historical event, however, the Lincoln assassination, the JFK assassination, the events of 9/11, there will be many anomalous details. That's just the way history works. Events that cannot be fully explained. This is because, for no other reason than simply the law of large numbers. The number of variables is so high that quirky events and strange coincidences are not only bound to happen, they're inevitable. It would be remarkable if you could explain to arbitrary detail every tiny aspect of any large, complex historical event. Plus, we can't possibly know all the situational factors that have contributed to how events unfolded. Who may have had a cold on one day or woke up late, for example. The little quirky events of everyday life intrude and play a part in the larger event. But you cannot possibly know all of them, and therefore there will always be anomalies to every tiny aspect of any large, complex historical event. Plus, we can't possibly know all the situational factors that have contributed to how events unfolded. Who may have had a cold on one day or woke up late, for example. The little quirky events of everyday life intrude and play a part in the larger event. But you cannot possibly know all of them, and therefore there will always be anomalies to find. The presence of anomalies, therefore, doesn't really tell us anything. But conspiracy theorists use that in order to cast a sinister light on events and